All right, hey guys, we're going to talk now about American nationalism. So the essential questions are: under what president do we have the era of good feelings? Who was the Adams-Onis Treaty with? What does it give us? And explain the Monroe Doctrine. This lesson is going to really transfer into so many more in the future. So it's like a foundation. So you really have to pay attention so other things later will make sense. Okay, so we're going to start with American nationalism. So it says you're going to have a new president here, James Monroe, 1817 to 1825. And he's going to serve 2 terms as president. This time period becomes known as the era of good feelings because you have this heightened sense of nationalism, almost like patriotism, optimism, that everything's going really well in the country. We finally settled in to this new democracy we have created. Things are going really well. So I want to show you James Monroe for a second. He becomes very important in presidential history because of his doctrine later. So here he is. There's James Monroe. And era of good feelings is just a really good time of patriotism where people feel good about the country. Since the Federalist Party, as you know, has died out with Hamilton, that leaves only the Democratic Republican Party dominating in every part of the country. So Republicans blocked the renewal of the BUS, the Bank of the United States. So private banks start to take over, and currency is left unregulated. Prices continue to rise and go up. So it's sort of a problem. It says John Calhoun of South Carolina, who I'll show you in a minute, introduces a bill in the House of Representatives, and he proposes a second BUS. So it says Republicans start to see that maybe they need federal regulation of currency. So second BUS. All right, so he'll propose that to try to get things under control, start regulating the money again. Here is Calhoun, very important figure in American history. Crazy looking man. This is honestly the best looking picture that I could find of him. As he ages, things get worse, believe it or not, and I'll show you those as we inch towards Civil War. He becomes very important in the fight for states' rights later. But just so you know right now, he is from South Carolina. Okay, John C. Calhoun. So he's going to actually propose the second BUS, to help with the currency problem. So it says after the War of 1812, British goods start coming into the U.S. again, but this time prices are much cheaper than the U.S. manufacturer prices. So therefore, everyone's going to buy the cheaper good, which is British made. So it says Congress passes a tariff of 1860. Remember, tariff is a tax on imports. This is called a protective tariff to protect American workers, designed to protect American manufacturers by taxing imports to drive up those prices. So a couple of pictures. Here's how a tariff works. And I've saved this over these lessons because I think this is the best place to fully explain it, because it'll start getting complicated. So for example, in America, a roll of cloth during this time would cost $4. Okay? In Britain, it costs $4. So if this is a different color, a different make or something, and we want variety, then we may import this different kind of cloth in. As it's coming over, it says a 25% tariff of $1 is added to the price. And when it arrives in America, suddenly it's $5. So instead of anyone buying this in America, we're going to buy the American made. That's protective tariff. It protects the American worker who made this $4 roll from consumers in America buying the British made product. Okay, now with that said, this is what happens. It says Congress responds with the tariff of 1816, which puts a tax on lots of foreign products. It will help northern factories compete because now people are going to buy the American product in America, It says, and many Northerners therefore support the tariff because they're the industry, they're the factory workers, remember? Now, they haven't fully got to a factory mechanization like we think of. But I'm saying there are people in one large room making things, and we're getting closer to mechanization. So they're producing a product for the factory, and the Northerners are happy with the fact that their product is going to be cheaper than anything coming from the outside, Europe. Okay, but these tariffs are going to force Southerners to pay more because they don't have industry in the South. Very few industries. So they're having to purchase these items too. And it says many Southerners oppose the high tariff because they don't have lots of options. They're not making anything in the South. So they oppose this. They want the British product to be cheaper. Okay? So just remember, Southerners not too big on the tariff. Okay, so that's the tariff. It says, meanwhile, Supreme Court Chief Justice John Marshall and his court are going to rule on several Supreme Court cases that we still apply today. And he's going to absolutely demand in this court the dominance of the federal government over the state. And we call this the Supremacy Clause. Okay, so a couple of things about Supremacy Clause for you to know. Okay, first is it's basically the form of federalism. Remember federalism? I did it as a rainbow. Same thing here. That's why I taught it to you in the earlier unit. Here you have the U.S. Constitution as supreme. It's on top. Then anything Congress does. Then the state constitution. Then the state laws. And then the city and county laws. So they're at the bottom. And the power comes from here to here. So city and county is going to have the least amount of power. United States Constitution, the federal government has the most. Okay, so it's showing the federal government is supreme. Here is another one that'll make sense to you. All right, it says Article 6 here in the Constitution states the Supremacy Clause. State governments may not make any law or take any action that is against the United States Constitution or any national law. So a state cannot override a national government law. So it says, we the people, the Constitution of the United States is number one. And it's showing that the states are not going to be able to undo anything in the United States Constitution. Big fish equals little fish. Okay? So these states, yes, they make up the United States, but the U.S. Constitution is supreme. Now, let me explain these cases. Very important. Okay, both of them. McCulloch versus Maryland. So McCulloch versus Maryland. Maryland was actually printing their own money, which you know from the Constitution is a federal government right, not a state government right. And it says they were wanting the Bank of the United States to recognize the Maryland money. What's the Bank of the United States? And Maryland is not supposed to be printing their own money according to the Constitution. So the Supreme Court ruled here under John Marshall that federal government is supreme over states, and the bus has implied power. It's implied a Bank of the United States can control a state bank. So therefore, it said, no, Maryland cannot print its own money. I mean, duh, okay? Gibbons versus Ogden. So this one says Congress can regulate interstate trade. So trade that goes from one state to the next can be regulated by Gibbons versus Ogden, under this case, by the federal government. So the federal government can control shipping rates and all that. Why is that important? If you remember, in the Articles of Confederation, we didn't regulate trade, and one state would jack up their prices against another, and then that state would boycott, and it was a mess. Another quick example is in the Super Bowl where Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake were. If you recall that, it's been some time ago. And Justin Timberlake ripped her shirt and everything was exposed. Not everything, but half of everything was exposed. That situation meant that MTV had sponsored that halftime show at the Super Bowl, which obviously, and therefore MTV could be sued by a federal trade commission because the federal government can regulate trade, interstate trade. You might say, what's that got to do with interstate trade? Because it was a halftime show. And why do people watch the Super Bowl? for the commercials. So that is selling a product across state lines. Okay, the whole country was watching it, and therefore the federal government can control what is put on national television. Okay, so Givens versus Ogden. All right, next is Florida. So Florida has become a problem. Runaway slaves would go there to escape slavery, and they're going into the Spanish territory to get away from slavery. Native Americans were holding raids going upwards into Georgia against Americans living in Georgia. So General Andrew Jackson is going to go into Florida here and destroy villages, kill lots of natives, Seminoles, for example, Spanish settlements, and take many areas of Florida. He's going to stir it all up. He's going to kill a lot of Indians. A couple pictures of that. Here first is the Florida territory that we're talking about, that at this time is in the hands of the Spanish. Also part of this area here. Okay, remember we've already gotten this from Pinckney's Treaty, but this area and this area is still in the hands of the Spanish. Here's Jackson in Florida. This is so awesome. I have something on my screen. This is so awesome. If you see here, here's Jackson. This sword here has green overlay at the top. You can barely see it. And I want to show you the actual sword that I saw at the Smithsonian, and just about had a nerd moment because I cannot believe I was looking at Andrew Jackson's sword. He's going to use this sword to kill a lot of Indians, and he's going to use this sword in the War of 1812. See the green now, maybe? Really awesome artifact. It's his actual sword. So he's going to kill a lot of Native Americans. Adams on his treaty says Spain gives us all the land of Florida. So we're going to negotiate. Spain will give us Florida to the United States, and we will now finalize the Louisiana Purchase. So with that is this, Adams on his treaty, and you see it here. So now it says United States is this area here to the Mississippi and part of Louisiana. And then this, right now we're considering our territory from the Louisiana Purchase, not yet states, because people are starting to come in. And new boundary line is set. And Spain will give us this territory here. This territory here. A lot of to do with Jackson going down there and wreaking havoc, and the Spanish can't handle it. Okay, so last thing is Latin America. Very important. So Spain's losing its power in the United States, losing some of its empire, and basically it decides to seek European help to help regain their colonies and encourage Europeans to take other colonies. So we get upset about that, and we say, no, we have defeated the Spanish out of Florida. They need to go on back, and nobody else needs to come over here. So we don't want Europeans in the Western Hemisphere. Western Hemisphere meaning North America and South America. So President James Monroe gives this statement. It becomes known as the Monroe Doctrine. And he says, henceforth, Americas are not to be considered as subjects for future colonization by any European power. We are not going to be colonies, us, United States, but North America and South America will not be colonized anymore by Europe. Europe needs to stay out of our business. Okay, stay out of our business. December 2nd, 1823, we oppose any attempt by Europe to intervene in the Western Hemisphere, us and Latin America. Okay, so real quick. Oh, I haven't got that far. Here's Henry Clay next. I want to show you that. We're going to do something on Monroe Doctrine in class, so I didn't do too much with that in here. Here's Henry Clay. Clay and Crazy Hair Calhoun are going to work together. Clay becomes very important also later as we inch towards Civil War. Okay, don't forget him. So Henry Clay, the great compromiser, he's known as, and John Calhoun pushed the American system. Let's build up what we have in America to help our economy and promote U.S. manufacturing. So let's have those high tariffs, protective tariffs to protect the American worker. Let's have the second bus, which we've already talked about, that Calhoun already sponsored. But this is the big part that I haven't said yet. System of internal improvements, roads, bridges, canals. So I brought some road, okay, for my kids' stuff. And so think of Henry Clay and Calhoun with this. They're going to start building roads all throughout the United States, okay, like this. You need to go back and answer your essential questions.